Before you read this amazing story, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss these heartwarming moments that remind us about the beauty of human kindness. Now, let's begin. The morning sun was shining bright over London as tourists gathered outside Buckingham Palace. The air was filled with excitement and the sound of cameras clicking constantly. People from all over the world stood behind the barriers, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal guards in their famous black uniforms and tall bearskin hats. The guards stood perfectly still, their faces showing no emotion, looking straight ahead as if they were made of stone. This was their job. They had trained for years to stand in this exact position without moving a single muscle. Among the crowd that day was a family from a small town in the countryside. They had saved money for months to bring their 8-year-old son, Marcus, to see the palace. Marcus had autism, which meant his brain worked a little differently from other children. He sometimes found it hard to understand social rules and could become overwhelmed in busy places. His parents were worried about bringing him to such a crowded location, but Marcus had asked so many times to see the royal guards that they finally decided to make the journey. Marcus was different in many beautiful ways. He loved order and patterns. He could spend hours looking at things that fascinated him, especially things that were symmetrical and perfectly arranged. When his mother told him about the guards and their uniforms, his eyes lit up with pure joy. He had watched videos online and had become obsessed with the guards and their ceremonial clothing. His bedroom walls were covered with pictures he had drawn of the guards in their exact uniforms. He knew every detail about them, from the number of buttons on their jackets to the exact height of their hats. The family arrived early in the morning to find a good spot. Marcus was wearing a new shirt his grandmother had bought him, and he was holding a small notebook in his hands. Inside the notebook were drawings he had made of the guards. He felt nervous, but excited at the same time. His father held his hand gently, and his mother stood close by, ready to comfort him if the crowd became too much. Marcus had learned some coping strategies to help him when he felt overwhelmed, like focusing on his breathing and looking at his special pictures as they waited with the growing crowd. Marcus became quieter. He was studying everything around him. His eyes moved carefully from one guard to another, noticing the smallest details. He could see that the guards were trying very hard to stay still and not react to anything happening around them. Marcus understood that feeling. He also tried hard every day to understand a world that often felt confusing and loud to him. There was something about the guards that made sense to him. They had rules, structure, and everything was exactly as it should be. Time passed slowly as Marcus watched the guards. His parents noticed that he seemed calm, which surprised them. Usually, crowded places made him anxious. But here, watching these perfectly still guards, Marcus seemed peaceful. He kept looking at his notebook and then back at the guards, comparing his drawings to the real thing. He was so focused that nothing else seemed to matter. The noise of the crowd faded away in his mind. Then something unexpected happened. The current guard shift was about to change, which meant a new guard would take the position. Marcus's breathing became faster, and his parents noticed his excitement growing. He had read about the changing of the guard ceremony, and he knew it was about to happen. This was his favorite part. He gripped his notebook tighter and moved a little closer to the barrier. His mother gently squeezed his shoulder, letting him know she was right there with him. The new guard approached his position with very careful steps. He was tall and proud, and his uniform was absolutely perfect. Every button shined, and his boots were polished until they looked like mirrors. Marcus watched every single movement. This was magic to him. The precision, the perfection, the way everything was exactly right. His heart was beating fast, and a small smile appeared on his face. His parents smiled too, seeing their son so happy in this moment. What nobody knew at that moment was that this ordinary day was about to become something extraordinary. The meeting between a young boy with autism and a royal guard would soon create a moment that neither of them would ever forget. It would be a moment that would show the world something beautiful and true about human connection, kindness, and understanding. The guard had no idea that his life was about to change in a small but significant way. And Marcus had no idea that his courage would soon inspire thousands of people. Marcus stood at the barrier with his notebook still in his hands. His eyes were following every movement of the guard, with complete attention. The guard was standing in his position now, as still as a statue. Marcus could see the slight reflection of light on the guard's perfectly polished boots. He wanted to get a closer look at the details. He wanted to understand how someone could stand so still for so long without moving even one tiny bit. His parents were watching him carefully. They knew that Marcus sometimes did things without thinking, especially when he was focused on something. His mother had warned him several times about not wandering away or doing anything that might disturb the guards. The rules were clear. The tourists were supposed to stay behind the barrier. Nobody was allowed to approach the guards or try to touch them. The guards were there to protect the palace, and they had to maintain their dignity and composure. But Marcus's curiosity was growing stronger and stronger. He kept looking at his drawings, and then at the real guard. There was something he noticed in his drawings that looked slightly different from what he was seeing in real life. He wanted to understand what it was. His mind worked in this particular way where details were very important to him. A small difference could bother him until he figured it out completely. His father noticed that Marcus was becoming restless. He started to shift his weight from one foot to another, which was unusual for him. Normally, Marcus could stand still for a long time. His father gently asked him if he was okay, and Marcus nodded but did not answer with words. He sometimes found it difficult to speak when he was thinking hard about something. He would need a moment to find the right words. Marcus looked at his drawings one more time. Then, very slowly, he moved his backpack from his shoulder to the front of his body. Inside the backpack was something special. Before leaving home, Marcus had prepared a small gift. He had carefully drawn extra pictures of the guard on nice paper and had colored them with his best colored pencils. He had also written a note in his careful handwriting. The note said, "You were very good at standing still. Thank you for protecting the palace." He had spent hours on this gift because he wanted it to be perfect. His mother suddenly realized what he was thinking. She could read her son's mind sometimes because they had been together his whole life. She knew that Marcus was considering doing something that he had been thinking about for weeks. Before coming to London, he had talked about wanting to give his drawings to the guard. She had explained to him many times that this was not possible because of the rules. But Marcus was a determined little boy. When he made a decision, he found it very hard to change his mind. She gently placed her hand on his arm and whispered to him that they could not go past the barrier. She explained again that the guard could not accept gifts while he was on duty. She said that the guard had to stay in his position and could not talk to people. But Marcus was looking at his backpack, and his parents could see the disappointment in his eyes. They understood his feelings. They understood that to Marcus, this moment was very important, and that he had prepared for this day for a long time. The crowd around them was still growing. More and more tourists were arriving every minute. Some people were taking photographs, others were talking loudly, and everyone was trying to get the best view. The noise and chaos did not bother Marcus much because he was so focused on what he wanted to do. His father and mother exchanged a worried look. They were concerned about what might happen if Marcus suddenly decided to run past the barrier. They knew he could move quickly when he was determined about something. Minutes passed slowly. Marcus was still looking at the guard and still holding his notebook. His mind was working hard, trying to find a way to deliver his gift. He was thinking about what was possible and what was not possible. His parents were ready to stop him if he'd tried anything dangerous or against the rules. They did not want him to get in trouble with the palace security. But they also wanted to respect his feelings and his desire to show kindness to the guard. Then Marcus noticed something. The guard's eyes seemed to move very slightly. Just for one tiny second, the guard's eyes looked toward the crowd. Marcus caught this moment. It was like a secret signal between them. Marcus felt like the guard had seen him. He did not know that the guards were trained to be aware of everything happening around them, even though they looked like they were not paying attention. The guard had seen this young boy watching him with such intense focus. Something about this boy seemed different from the other tourists. Marcus took a deep breath. He felt his heartbeat in his chest. His parents were still holding on to him gently, but they were not stopping him from thinking about what he wanted to do. They knew that sometimes the best moments in life happen when we take small risks and try something we have never tried before. They were anxious, but also curious about what would happen next. The guard was standing perfectly still, waiting for his shift to end. He had no idea that a young boy with a special gift was about to change his day in a way he would never expect. The moment felt like it stretched for a very long time, even though it only lasted a few seconds. Marcus was holding his backpack with his gift inside. His hands were shaking a little bit because he was nervous and excited at the same time. His parents could feel the tension in his body. They knew their son well enough to understand that he was making a big decision about what to do next. Then, very suddenly, Marcus did something that surprised everyone around him. He took one step forward toward the barrier. His parents immediately held onto him more firmly, thinking he was about to run past the line. But Marcus did not try to run. Instead, he reached into his backpack very carefully and pulled out one of his drawings. The drawing was beautiful and colorful. He had spent many hours creating it, and every detail was perfect in his mind. It showed the guard in his complete uniform with all the buttons and badges. It's exactly right. Marcus held the drawing up high so the guard could see it. He was still standing behind the barrier, so he was following the rules. But he was making his presence known in a way that was hard to ignore. Some of the people around him noticed what he was doing. A few tourists started to watch this small boy with the drawing. His mother was nervous. She could see that Marcus was doing this in a respectful way. The guard's face remained completely still and expressionless. This was his training. Guards at Buckingham Palace are taught to never react to anything, no matter what happens around them. They are taught to stay focused on their duty and to maintain the image of strength and authority. But the guard could see the drawing clearly, and he could see the small boy's determined face. Something inside the guard's heart moved. He could tell that this boy had put real effort and love into creating this picture for the guard, whose name was Thomas. Standing in this position all day was lonely and exhausting. He had to stay completely still for hours, and he could not talk to anyone or show any emotions. Sometimes he felt like a machine rather than a person. People looked at him every day, but nobody really saw him as a person. They saw a uniform and a role. But this small boy was different. This boy had taken the time to draw a picture of him and to create something special just for him. Marcus was still holding his drawing up. His parents did not stop him because they could see that their son was being respectful and safe. They were also curious about what would happen. In that moment, something very small but very important happened. The guard's eyes moved. Just barely, just a fraction of an inch, his eyes shifted to look at the drawing. It was the smallest movement possible, but it was enough. Marcus saw it. The young boy's face lit up with the biggest smile his parents had ever seen. In that single moment of connection, something passed between the guard and the boy. The guard had acknowledged the gift. The guard had seen Marcus not just as another tourist, but as a person with something meaningful to say. For Marcus, who spent so much of his life feeling like people did not understand him or see him as he truly was, this moment was everything. Marcus carefully brought the drawing down and held it against his chest. His eyes never left the guard's face. He wanted to remember this moment forever. His parents were amazed at what they were witnessing. They realized that their son had just done something that took real courage. He had broken out of his usual way of doing things and had made a real human connection with another person. More people in the crowd started to notice what was happening. Someone took a photograph of Marcus still holding his drawing and looking at the guard with such intensity and emotion. The photograph captured something pure and honest. It showed a young boy doing something kind and brave. Word started to spread through the crowd. People began talking about the small boy and his drawing. The atmosphere around the barrier changed from just ordinary sightseeing to something more meaningful. The guard remained in his position, but something had shifted inside him. He had been touched by this moment. He had seen the love and effort that this boy had put into creating a gift for him. Most people treated the guards as if they were not real people. But this boy had treated the guard like a person who deserved kindness and appreciation. The guard was not allowed to smile or show emotions, but inside his chest, his heart felt warmer than it had in a long time. Marcus's mother put her arm around her son. His father smiled with pride. They had come to London hoping to give their son a good memory, but they had not expected anything like this. They had not expected their son to teach them such an important lesson about courage and kindness. As they stood there with the growing crowd watching them, none of them could have predicted that this quiet moment at Buckingham Palace would soon be shared with millions of people around the world. The power of one small act of kindness was about to change everything. The guard named Thomas remained at his post, but his mind was racing. He had been trained extensively to maintain composure and to show absolutely no reaction to anything that happened around him. Guards at Buckingham Palace represent tradition and strength. They are expected to be like statues throughout their entire shift. But what had just happened with the boy had affected him deeply. He was trying very hard to keep his face completely still, even though his emotions were trying to break through. In his years as a guard, Thomas had seen thousands of tourists. He had experienced people trying to make him laugh, people making jokes, people trying to take selfies with him, people trying to touch his uniform. He had been trained to ignore all of it, but this was different. This was not about trying to break his composure or make a scene. This was a genuine act of kindness from a young person who understood something about his role that many adults never seemed to understand. The photograph that had been taken continued to spread quickly through the crowd. People were sharing it on their phones and talking about it in excited voices. The image showed the small boy with his drawing, still looking at the guard with such pure emotion. People were pointing at the photograph and then looking at the actual guard, trying to see if they could catch any change in his expression. Most of them could not see anything because the guard had trained so hard to maintain his perfect composure. Back at the palace headquarters, security personnel were also watching what was happening. They had cameras monitoring the area constantly. When they saw the boy approach the barrier with his drawing, they were ready to respond if there was any danger or if the rules were being broken. But they quickly realized that this was not a security threat. This was simply a young boy doing something kind and innocent. They decided to let the moment happen. The palace officials made a decision that would become very important to the story. Marcus was still standing near the barrier with his drawing. His parents had explained to him that the guard could not come and take the drawing, because the guard had to stay in his position. Marcus seemed to understand this, but his mind was already working on another plan. He was thinking about how he could leave his drawing in a place where the guard could find it after his shift ended. He did not want his gift to be wasted or forgotten. He wanted the guard to have something to take home with him. His mother watched her son's face and could almost see the gears turning in his mind. She had learned to recognize the signs that he was thinking about something important. She asked him gently what he was planning. Marcus looked at her and said very quietly that he wanted to leave the drawing on the barrier where the guard could see it after his shift. He explained that this way, the guard would have the picture to take home with him, remember the moment forever. Marcus's father thought about this plan. It was creative and thoughtful. It respected the rules and did not ask the guard to do anything that was against his duties. The father looked around and saw that the palace security personnel were watching but seemed to be allowing the situation to continue. He decided that this was okay. He told Marcus that he could leave one of his drawings on the barrier. They would make sure to show the drawing to the guard in a respectful way. Marcus was overjoyed by this decision. He carefully selected one of his best drawings from his backpack. This one had extra details that he had worked on very hard. He had drawn not just the guard but also the palace in the background. He had colored it with special metallic pencils that made the uniform shine. He had even written words at the bottom that said, "Thank you for your service and for your patience." Marcus had asked his mother how to spell these words correctly because he wanted everything to be perfect, with his parents' help. Marcus placed the drawing very carefully on the top of the barrier in a spot where the guard would definitely see it. When he turned his head, or when he finished his shift, the drawing was secured carefully so the wind would not blow it away. Several tourists around them watched this happen, and more people started taking photographs. The moment was becoming bigger than just a simple encounter between a boy and a guard. Thomas, still standing perfectly still in his position, had caught a glimpse of what was happening from the corner of his eye. He could not turn his head to look directly, but he was very aware that something was being left on the barrier near him. His heart was beating faster, but he maintained his perfect posture and his blank expression. He did not know exactly what was being left there, but he had a feeling it was the drawing from the young boy. The crowd around the barrier had grown even larger now. People were speaking in different languages, all talking about the same thing. The story was spreading. Some people were saying that they thought it was the most beautiful thing they had seen at the palace. Others were moved by the idea that a child had shown such kindness and respect to someone doing an important job. The energy in the area had changed from ordinary tourism to something more meaningful and emotional. As Marcus and his parents began to move away from the barrier, Marcus turned back one more time to look at the guard. The guard's position had not changed at all. He was still perfectly still and silent. But Marcus felt like something had happened between them. He felt like they had had a real conversation, even though they had not spoken any words. He felt like the guard understood what he had tried to do, and that the guard appreciated it. This feeling was very important to Marcus because he did not always feel understood by people. Hours passed. The shift continued at Buckingham Palace, as it always did. More tourists came and went throughout the day. The drawing that Marcus had left on the barrier remained in its place, carefully positioned so that the wind would not disturb it. The palace security had noticed the drawing and had made the decision to leave it there. They understood that something meaningful was happening. They wanted to protect and honor that moment. Thomas's shift was coming to an end. He had been standing in his position for many hours without moving. His feet were sore and his muscles were stiff, but his face remained completely expressionless and his body remained perfectly still. This was what his job demanded of him. As the time came for the changing of the guard, another guard approached to take his position. Thomas would finally be able to step down and return to his normal duties. When Thomas was finally released from his post, the first thing he did was look carefully at the barrier. He could see the drawing that the young boy had left for him. His supervisor was with him, and the supervisor explained what had happened during the shift. The supervisor told Thomas about the young boy with autism who had created the drawing, and how the entire scene had touched many people who had witnessed it. Thomas carefully picked up the drawing and held it in his hands. As Thomas looked at the drawing, his eyes filled with tears. He had not expected to feel such strong emotions. The drawing was beautiful and detailed. Every button on the uniform was exactly right. Every badge was perfectly placed. But it was more than just the artistic skill that moved him. It was the fact that someone had cared enough to create something for him. Someone had taken the time to show appreciation for his work and his sacrifice. The palace officials had also noticed what was happening. They saw that this moment had affected many people. They saw that the photographs were already spreading on social media. People were sharing the images and telling the story about the autistic boy and the royal guard. The palace decided that this was a story that should be shared more widely. They wanted people to know about acts of kindness and understanding. They wanted to show that connection between people was still possible in the modern world. The palace made contact with Marcus's family. The officials explained that their son's actions had inspired many people, and that the palace would like to do something special to honor this moment. They offered to invite the family back to the palace for a private meeting between Marcus and Thomas. They wanted to bring these two people together so that they could properly meet and have a real conversation. If Marcus was comfortable with that, Marcus's family was amazed by this invitation. They were shocked that what had started as a simple act of kindness from their son had grown into something so significant. They agreed to the invitation, and they began to prepare Marcus for this special meeting. They explained to him that the guard he had given his drawing to wanted to meet him properly and to thank him in person. Marcus was very excited by this news. He immediately started creating another drawing, an even more elaborate one, to give to Thomas as an official gift. When they arrived at the palace for the private meeting, Marcus was nervous and excited. His heart was beating very fast. He had been thinking about this moment for days. His parents had helped him practice what he might say and how he might feel during the meeting. They had explained that it was okay to be nervous and that Thomas would understand his feelings. Thomas was also nervous about this meeting. He had spent days thinking about the drawing and about the young boy who had created it. He had shown the drawing to his family and to his friends. Everyone had been moved by the story. Thomas had experienced something during that shift that had changed how he thought about his job. He realized that the work he did mattered to people, and that people appreciated his effort, even though they expressed it in different ways. When Marcus and Thomas finally saw each other face to face, something magical happened. Marcus looked at the guard, and the guard looked at the boy. For a moment, nobody said anything. They were just looking at each other, recognizing the connection that had started when Marcus held up his drawing at the barrier. Then Marcus smiled, and Thomas smiled back. It was a real smile, not the blank expression of a guard on duty. It was the smile of one human being connecting with another human being. Marcus gave Thomas his new drawing. It was even more beautiful than the first one. Thomas received it with such gratitude and warmth. He thanked Marcus for his kindness and for caring enough to create something so special. He explained to Marcus that his job could sometimes feel lonely and that Marcus's drawing had reminded him why his work was important. He told Marcus that he was brave and kind and that the world needed more people like him. The photographs and videos of this private meeting were later shared with permission. They spread across social media and touched the hearts of millions of people. People from all over the world were sharing the story of Marcus and Thomas. Some people were crying as they watched the videos. Others were inspired to show more kindness to people in their own communities. The story became about so much more than just a boy and a guard. It became about human connection, acceptance, and the power of showing appreciation to others. Weeks passed after the meeting between Marcus and Thomas. The story continued to spread all around the world. Major news organizations picked up the story and shared it with their viewers and readers. What had started as a quiet moment at Buckingham Palace had become an international story about kindness and human connection. Millions of people who had never met Marcus or Thomas were now moved by their interaction. Schools started using the story to teach children about kindness and acceptance. Teachers showed their classes the photographs and videos and talked about what it meant to be kind to others and to show appreciation for people who do important work. Children in many different countries learned about Marcus and Thomas. Some children wrote letters to Marcus telling him how much his story had inspired them. Some children decided to create their own drawings and gifts for people in their communities. Thomas became something of a local celebrity. People would come to Buckingham Palace specifically hoping to see him during his guard shifts. Many of them brought drawings or gifts for him, all inspired by Marcus's original gift. Thomas was deeply moved by all of this attention and kindness. He realized that Marcus's act had opened a door to human connection that had been closed before. He started to understand his role as a guard in a completely different way. He was not just representing tradition and authority. He was representing service to people, and people had noticed and appreciated it. Marcus also experienced changes in his life after the story spread. He became more confident in his own abilities and in his unique way of seeing the world. He realized that being different was not something to be ashamed of. His different way of thinking, which had sometimes made him feel isolated, was actually a gift that he could share with others. He started to believe in himself more. He continued to create beautiful drawings. He started to share them with the world through social media and art exhibitions. The palace continued to support the friendship between Marcus and Thomas. They were invited back for special events and occasions. Thomas and Marcus stayed in touch and developed a real friendship. They would send each other drawings and letters. Thomas would tell Marcus stories about his work, and Marcus would create art inspired by those stories. It was a beautiful example of how two people from very different backgrounds could connect on a deep and meaningful level. More importantly, the story inspired a larger conversation about autism and acceptance. People began to understand autism better. They learned that autistic people had unique strengths and perspectives that should be valued rather than seen as problems to be fixed. Parents of autistic children reached out to share their own stories. They talked about how Marcus's courage had encouraged them to be more confident in supporting their own children's unique abilities and interests. Organizations that worked with autistic individuals started to use the story as an example of what acceptance and inclusion could look like. The palace even launched an initiative to improve accessibility and understanding for visitors with autism and other disabilities. They created quieter areas, provided sensory-friendly tours, and trained their staff to be more aware and accepting of people with different needs. All of this grew out of one moment of kindness and connection. Thomas continued his work as a royal guard. but his perspective had completely changed. He started to see every person who came to the palace as someone with a story, someone with emotions, someone who deserved to be recognized as a human being. He became an advocate within the palace for treating visitors with more warmth and personal recognition. He encouraged other guards to think about their role, not just as maintaining order and protocol, but as representing the palace's commitment to connecting with people. Marcus's parents watched their son flourish after this experience. They saw him become more social and more confident. They saw him discover that his unique way of seeing the world was actually beautiful and valuable. Marcus continued to pursue art, and his drawings became even more impressive and meaningful. He started to work with art teachers and therapists to help other autistic children develop their artistic talents and boost their confidence. Years later, when journalists would ask Marcus about that day at Buckingham Palace, he would talk about how he had felt a real connection with Thomas, even though they had not spoken words. He would explain that he had understood that Thomas was working hard to do his job well, that he wanted to show appreciation for that effort. He would talk about how nervous he had been, but how his courage had led to something beautiful. Thomas would share similar reflections. He would talk about how that moment with Marcus had taught him that his work mattered in ways he had never fully realized. He would talk about how showing up every day and doing his duty well was a way of serving people and earning their respect. He would explain how Marcus's drawing and gift had reminded him that connection and kindness were more important than perfection and protocol. The story of Marcus and Thomas lived on in the hearts and minds of millions of people around the world. It became a reminder that small acts of kindness could create huge ripples of positive change. It showed that connection between people could happen even in unexpected situations. It demonstrated that being different was not something to hide or be ashamed of, but something that could make the world more beautiful. Most importantly, it proved that when people approached each other with genuine kindness and respect, something truly magical could happen. And that magic could touch the hearts of millions of people, inspiring them to be kinder, more understanding, and more accepting of others in their own lives.